Hello world, this is your very own product evangelist, Stefan from Clerk.io. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about cookies. And no, unfortunately, I don't mean the good old chocolate chip cookies that grandma used to make, God bless. I'm of course talking about the internet-based ones. Now, the reason why I want to discuss cookies is of course because cookies have been widely used on the internet to track user behavior and actually also making website experiences better. But we are seeing a decline in the use of cookies because of privacy regulations. This means that cookies are slowly becoming less and less relevant for tracking because users can actually say no to having any cookies being used on the website. And that means that tracking and things like personalized content is slowly going to get harder and harder to show. Or is it? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So most of you might already know what cookies are, but in case you don't, let's just break it down. In essence, a cookie is just a text file with a piece of information in it. This text file is then often used to store information about a visit to a website. So it could, for example, be used to remember a password or remember the last thing that a customer clicked on or even their username if they typed it in. Stuff like this that makes it faster to use the website the next time. You generally split cookies into multiple types, but some of those types are first-party cookies, which are cookies that are put on the computer by the website you are visiting, and third-party cookies, which would be added by external sources like Google, for example. So what is the problem with cookies? The problem is that it becomes harder and harder to track meaningful data with cookies because of these increased privacy regulations. For example, now users can just say no to having any cookies on the site with a simple click of a button, as I mentioned in the beginning, but ad blockers and other types of privacy apps are getting more and more widespread because we as consumers want to stay more private on the internet. Of course, this provides quite a lot of problems for e-commerce because email services and Google Analytics and a lot of these external tools that you use to figure out if your business is thriving actually rely on cookies and website data to allow you to show statistics. On top of that, many personalization and automation tools out there are actually mainly based on website data like searches and clicks and browsing, which means that with these increased regulations and the fact that it's going to get harder and harder to track with cookies, all of that is going to be much less relevant. And then you might ask yourself, what do we do then? Because we still want to be able to track on the website and we still want to be able to provide a good service to our customers in order to keep a high conversion rate. And there are alternatives. First of all, I think what's going to happen in the future is that we are going to see a change in the mentality of new tools coming onto the market that are much more privacy focused. And it also means that for e-commerce businesses, they need to already now start researching tools that allow them to have a good customer experience on the website without sacrificing privacy. What this means for e-commerce businesses more specifically is that it's going to be important to start looking for tools that can automate the web shop without necessarily relying on search data, browse data, click data, and so on, which is normally saved in cookies. So let's discuss how Clerk.io handles this. First of all, ever since Clerk.io was founded more than 10 years ago, we've always been very focused on being privacy first, because we believe that it must be possible to have a fantastic internet experience for consumers without violating their privacy. This is something that we've always invested a lot of thought and work into, and every time we create a feature, we make sure that it does save time and make more revenue for e-commerce businesses without violating the privacy of their customers. With this approach, we were actually able to fairly easily go completely cookieless in May 2022. The reason is that we've actually never relied heavily on the website data like searches and clicks and browsing and so on, but mainly used that for enriching the results that our AI already gave back. To summarize what our AI does, it basically analyzes all the data on a web shop and then builds a knowledge graph around the behavior on that web shop. The knowledge graph is basically a way of visualizing that the AI understands abstract concepts on a web shop. For example, if you have a clothing store, we know that something is a shoe and something is a set of pants or a t-shirt or a hat, and we also know how those relate to each other. So the AI will know that a pair of pants and a set of shoes will normally sell together and that there are cheap and expensive versions of these. We will also know that there's a difference between them being blue or red or size medium or size extra large. All of these are concepts that the AI understands on the web shop. The order data is a crucial part of this as well, because orders are much more important than website data. The reason is that we tend to click and search for a lot of products on the internet, but we don't necessarily want to buy them just because we've been searching or browsing, because we are just investigating. When you place an order, that is a surefire way of knowing that this product was definitely relevant for that particular customer. And so the AI with the knowledge graph also understands how the products are selling together, which customers buy what, at what time they're normally likely to buy, and so on. Basically, the AI understands all of these connections on the web shop without using any website data whatsoever. Now, we do use website data, of course, because we need to be able to show statistics. We need to also be able to show visitor-related recommendations on the website if there are no orders yet. But the AI itself doesn't actually use this website data. It just enriches it. So let's say on a web shop, customers might buy a tent and then mosquito repellent. Then we know that there's a connection between those products. And then if I, as a consumer, I have been clicking around tents, then I will of course also get shown the mosquito repellent. Now that's a very simple example, but it's just to show that the AI understands the concepts, and the visitor data is then used to figure out where I'm roughly browsing, and then using the knowledge graph to show products to me. We also, of course, use it for statistics, because an important part of running an automation tool like Clerk is to show that it gives a good return on investment. And here we also use website data, which is clicks on products shown by Clerk, to figure out if the consumers then buy those products after clicking on them. The way that Clerk handles this is that we think about consumers or customers in two different ways. Every time somebody comes to our website using Clerk.io, they get what's called a visitor ID. This visitor ID is a set of characters that identifies the session and what the visitor is doing within that session. Earlier, the only way we could do this was to put a third-party cookie on the computer that saved this ID. But after we went cookieless, we've actually found a way of doing this entirely without adding cookies to the website. I'll show you how this works in more detail in a moment, but let's start by just digging into how the customer model works in Clerk. So first of all, what you'll see here is I'm on a page with an order where you can see my email address here. If I click on that, this is my customer profile. I've purchased only one order, and here we can see the average order value and so on. But the main thing is my email address was tracked because I placed an order. We'll then be able to see down here that I also have a visitor ID, and the visitor ID was connected to my email address when I placed an order. There are multiple ways that this visitor ID can be connected to an email address, for example by clicking in a recommendation shown by Clerk or in an email sent by Clerk, but normally it's being tracked when the order is placed. With this, we now have a good idea of who the customer is, because we know that they have purchased a product that they were interested in, of course, and we also know that they have clicked on and interacted with something on the website. There's a lot of information that can be dug into here if you want to see it. Of course, this is also fully GDPR compliant, because you can show it to any customer that wants to see it and delete it by the click of a button. So let's get a bit more technical and dig into what this looks like on an actual website. So I'm going to use Evolution Organics as an example here, and we're going to dig into the network section where we can see all the interactions with Clerk. So first of all, if I refresh the page here, Evolution Organics are using a few banners from Clerk which show up as these network calls. And you can see here, as part of the call, we're sending something called Visitor Auto. Visitor Auto means that Clerk.io generates the visitor ID that we use for tracking the website data, but it doesn't need to put a cookie on the customer's computer. Basically, what this Visitor Auto translates into is the ID that I showed you before here. And every single customer coming to the web shop will get an ID like this, which is used to identify their website activity. Now, the way that this ID is being generated is where the real magic, so to speak, happens, except it's not magic. We also decided to share it in case other people want to do the same, because of course we believe in a private internet for everybody. The way it works is that every time somebody interacts with a Clerk banner when you use Visitor Auto, we basically compute what's called a hash. And a hash is an encrypted value based on some data that you send to it. The data that we send is a combination of the visitor's IP, their user agent, and then what's called a unique store salt. The store salt is basically just a completely random set of characters for every single store that Clerk is installed on, meaning that it will be completely unique for that store. Also, this unique store salt is being changed every 30 days, which means that every 30 days, all of your consumers or your customers will get a completely new ID, so we don't have any long-term tracking. Once we've made a hash of that IP, we then compress it from base 16 to 62, which just means that it becomes a longer string and we get more information. Then lastly, we throw away over 80% of that hash, ending up with this set of characters that you also saw before. This is how it's going to be virtually impossible to guess what this hash has ever been, to be able to grab an IP or a user agent in order to make it completely private. Now the good thing is that we do this on every interaction, so it means that we don't need to put a cookie on the customer's computer. We simply do this every time a call is being made to Clerk, because the browser will always send this information in the call. Of course, there are multiple ways that Clerk can be configured. By standard, we are cookieless, as you can see, but we also have ways of adding persistent tracking. If customers do say yes to cookies, there's no reason not to put them. But you can actually also run Clerk as fully private and not track any visitor IDs at all should you want to. You can even customize your own ones. If you already have an existing way of tracking visitor IDs, then you can also do that in Clerk. And that's it for today, folks. This is how Clerk.io can help you automate and personalize your webshop without sacrificing the privacy of your customers. Should you have any questions about this, or do you want to talk more about how we can help you automate your webshop, please don't hesitate reaching out to us. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Have a fantastic day.